I've been there. You scroll through a sea of sleek images, all those glossy speakers promising the ultimate cinema experience, only to get them home and discover the bass feels thin, the highs are harsh, or the whole thing just sits there like a pricey paperweight. That gut-checking moment is why I'm doing this deep dive before you spend a chunk of your budget on a 7.1.4 home theater system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks wiring, listening, and comparing the Klipsch Ebony 7.1.4 bundle against a few other high-end options. So let's break down what really matters when you pull this thing out of the box. First off, the system isn't a single one-size-fits-all unit. You're getting 6 separate components. The flagship RP8060 2-floor standing front left and right, the RP6000F 2-center channel, the RP404C 2 rear surrounds, the RP600M 2 up-firing Dolby Atmos modules, the RP500SA 2 Dolby Atmos height speakers, and the RP1600SW subwoofer. That sounds like a lot, but it also means you can tailor the layout to a room that isn't a perfect rectangle, or that has a low ceiling. If you've ever tried to jam a full 7.1 system into a cramped apartment and ended up with tangled cables and speakers perched on shelves, you'll appreciate the modular nature of this set. The first thing I noticed during setup was the sheer size of the front floor standers. The horn-loaded design gives them a distinctive silhouette, and those big, flared horns actually do what the marketing says: they push more air and produce a richer mid-range. In a typical 12-foot living room, the RP8060 positioned a foot off the wall filled the space with a sound that felt more like a live performance than a TV soundtrack. The LTS titanium diaphragm tweeters added a sparkle that cut through dialogue without becoming shrill, which is a common complaint with bright-sounding home theater tweeters. But there's a hidden trade-off to that horn size. The speakers are fairly deep, and you need a little breathing room behind them. If you have a media console that sits flush against the wall, you'll either have to move the speakers forward or risk muffling the bass response. In my test room, pulling the fronts out by 6 inches gave the bass a noticeable lift, especially when the RP1600SW kicked in. The subwoofer itself is a solid, sealed box design with the new Cerametallic Woofers Klipsch touts. It delivers a punch that feels tight enough for an action movie chase scene, yet it doesn't overrun the mids, which can happen with larger ported subs. One practical strength that often gets lost in the hype is the bi-wiring or bi-amping capability on each speaker. The terminals are clearly labeled, and the system came with high-quality 14-gauge speaker wire that's long enough to reach most wall mounts without a runner. I tried bi-amping the front left and right by feeding the highs and lows from separate amplifier channels on my AVR. The result was a subtle but measurable improvement in clarity during a high-intensity sci-fi score. High frequencies stayed articulate while the lows stayed controlled. If you own a fairly recent receiver with multiple amp sections, that flexibility can actually translate into a cleaner soundstage. Now, who should walk away from this set? If you are a cinephile who spends evenings on Blu-ray or streaming services that support Dolby Atmos, and you have a dedicated media room, or at least a sizable living room, this bundle hits the sweet spot. The price point is steep, well into 4-figure territory, but you're buying 6 high-performance speakers plus a sub that all share a cohesive tonal signature. That cohesion matters when you want the sound to glide from the front left to the rear right without sounding like 3 mismatched brands. On the other hand, if you're mainly watching casual TV, sports, or gaming at a modest volume, the Klipsch 7.1.4 might be overkill. The system shines when you can let it breathe, both in terms of space and listening level. In a small apartment, the horns could dominate the room acoustically, making quiet dialogue feel like it's competing with the room's natural reverb. Also, the sheer number of cables required can be a nightmare for anyone not comfortable with cable management. I spent an afternoon labeling each pair, routing them behind the wall, and using cable ties to keep the bundle tidy. If you're not ready to commit to that level of setup, a 5.1 system, or a pair of high-quality soundbars with Atmos modules would likely serve you just fine. Another practical weakness that shows up after the excitement fades is the weight. The RP8060 FA floor standers each tip the scales at about 40 pounds. Moving them later to accommodate a new couch, or to rearrange the room isn't a one-click job. The rear surrounds, the RP404C2, are lighter but still require sturdy wall mounts, something the package does not include. You'll need to budget for mounting hardware if you don't already have it. In terms of daily usability, the system is surprisingly low maintenance once it's set up. The Cerametallic woofers don't need